president of this great name. Vanity Fair is known always as the Tiffany of the intimate apparel world. And he's going to give you a wonderful background because, you know, the history of your fashion world is very, very important, the history. And he will give you a little background. It'll be interesting. And to give you a little background, Mr. Holtz has been, beside being the Vanity Fair brand president, a leader in the global intimate apparel business with operations in the US, Europe, Mexico, Canada. He grew up outside of Pittsburgh. How many from Pennsylvania here? Anyone? Well, that's where he grew up, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and graduated from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Curt has more than 20-year experience in the apparel industry, and during that time has worked with Warnaco, VF Corp, and now Fruit of the Loom, which acquired VF last year, Vanity Fair brand. And I want you to make sure you make notes because, you know, December 1st is your final exam, multiple choice. So make sure all your notes are in order and you've taken them. And I'm going to pass the podium on to Mr. Holtz. I'm anxious for him to start and to get to know you.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me, right? No, I don't need to use the mic for that. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Okay. Well, when Ellis asked me to speak, it took me about 3 seconds to say that I was interested in doing it because you're probably very aware we've got a very special relationship with Ellis that dates way back before I ever started with the company. And I've been with Vanity Fair Brands in one form or another now for about 16 or 17 years. So she's been a special add to our company, has helped us with our trend and color services for a number of years. So when she said, you know, would you come and speak to the students, I thought I couldn't enjoy much other things more than I would enjoy coming and talking to you. But just to help me out a little bit, because I always like to understand who my audience is, and I never imagined whenever we talked about a date, I never really thought about the fact that it was going to be on an unbelievably historic night. And we're getting ready to go into the election process tomorrow. And yes, I'm going to break all the rules and talk about politics for just a second, but only because I'm really interested in it, and I have to do my own little focus group here. So just indulge me. Nothing controversial unless you want to. But who's going to vote? Almost. Yes. Very, very good. I hear you. I hear you. Well, see, you need to keep telling people that if they have the opportunity to vote, they need to vote. So it's great to see such a strong representation. Yeah, I understand that completely. Now, how many people here are from New York originally? Okay, pretty good representation. Then I was talking to a few here that are from the South. And how many international students? Terrific, great. Can I just real quick get from where? Fantastic. Just go ahead and shoot it off. Who else international? Shoot it off. Korea? Korea? Anybody else? England? Japan? Germany? Fantastic. And Pakistan. Great, great. Okay, that gives me a little bit of a sense. Well, I'll tell you what as Alice said, I'll just give you just a quick, because it's really not a very interesting story, but just a little bit about myself. I have been in the business for over 20 years. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. Huge Steeler fan, if that means anything to anybody out there. I'm a sports nut, forgive me. I know most of you probably could care less, but I publicize it everywhere I go, and I'm not going to stop. So But Western PA was my roots, but my wife and I started right out of college. We started moving around because the job environment at the time demanded it. So we did. I started out with Warnaco. She started out and spent several years with Liz Claiborne. She's now kind of taken a break and just enjoying herself. So I was with Warnaco for over 5 years in the sportswear business. And then I went to VF Corporation in 1990 and was with the jeans business for a couple of years. And then in 1993, very late 1993, I moved into the intimate apparel business, which, having some sportswear experience and, of course, jeanswear experience, I can contrast the businesses. And I will tell you there are more similarities than there are differences. But the intimate apparel category and the innerwear category, I happen to find very, very exciting to operate in because it is very close to the body, and it's a very personal experience. And it's really a personal experience for the consumers. So when I thought about what I wanted to talk to you about today and what you might find remotely interesting as you're starting out your potential careers, we are celebrating with Vanity Fair Brands. We are celebrating our 90th birthday of the Vanity Fair brand. Our company, Vanity Fair Brands, has multiple brands, and I'll give you just a quick highlight of that. But we are celebrating our flagship brand, Vanity Fair, is celebrating its 90th birthday next year in 2009. So I really started to think about, how many 90-year-old brands are there in the market? Let's think about how dynamic the marketplace is. You all know, because you've seen in previous presentations, as I understand, and you're all consumers. It doesn't matter U.S. or the international markets that we're talking about. It's extremely dynamic, and there's always new ideas and new brands that come and go. So what does it take to make a brand relevant and sustainable for 90 years? I thought, because I find that to be an incredible responsibility for myself and our management team, to have inherited the responsibility for such a great company and a great brand. And believe me, we take that responsibility extremely seriously as we think about positioning our company for the future and making the necessary changes as we move through this very dynamic climate. And we'll get down to, when we think about all those elements of consistency and reliability and sustainability, because I'm also going to ask you to think about, as we kind of talk through here, I'm going to relate it back to, which I do on a regular basis. Somebody did this for me earlier in my career, and I found it to be very, very helpful. And maybe you all have heard this. But I want you to think about yourself as you're coming out. Think about your personal brand. If anybody's asked you, what does your personal brand stand for? And how are you going to make sure that you keep that personal brand relevant and sustainable? And what are the key attributes? I'm going to talk about from a commercial brand point of view for a little bit. And I'm going to come back and I want to talk to you about some of those same attributes that make a commercial brand relevant and sustainable are very similar in some ways to what makes your personal brand relevant and sustainable and can allow you to create competitive separation in the marketplace. I think that's very, very important. And when you think about going out, sometimes you don't naturally think about you are a brand. Every one of us is a brand. Every one of us is a product. So as we kind of go through this stuff, which you might be saying, ho-hum, maybe interested, maybe not, it's all dovetailed back to talking about you individually, because you individually are going to be products very soon, and we're going to talk about how you're going to make your product compete and win in the environment. So with that, we have a cool little, I like it, I think Alice appreciated when she saw it too. We have just a little snapshot of our company that we're going to show in just one second, just a quick video to talk about the history of our business. Our company started back in the early 1900s, obviously next year is our 90th birthday. We actually were introduced very early on, spent all of our time in daywear and sleepwear, and did some gorgeous, gorgeous product, and have many, many firsts to be attributed to our company. We went about 30 or 40 years with being primarily a daywear sleepwear provider, and then roughly around 1960, our company broke into bras as well as shapewear as well as pants, and we went for probably another 20 years, really expanding in those arenas. And then you could start to see, just like the world that we live in, the pace of change sped up dramatically, because in 1990 was when our company acquired a brand and first went into the mass channel of distribution, first entered Walmart. And of course, we all know what's happened so explosively with that retailer and everybody that serves that. And that wasn't, it sounds like a long time ago, but when you think about it, 1990 was not that long ago, bless you, when we first went into that channel. Of course, we went from $0 to $80 million overnight, literally. So it's a powerful, powerful consumer franchise, to say the least. But we got into that retailer as recently as 1990. Then we added a couple of our we acquired some European businesses in the early 90s, and that's what created our European platform. As we moved forward, in the late 90s, we acquired a business here in New York called the Best Form business that also brought with it a very, very large international sourcing base, because our company, one of the things that we were not as quick to respond to was some of the chasing low-cost production around the world, because we had historically had a very strong franchise with domestic production. And that really brought us in, not only brought us the brands and the distribution that acquisition brought with it, but also brought with it all of the sourcing capability and knowledge, which was a real big plus for us. And then moving forward just a couple more years, we expanded out and formed joint venture partners in both Canada as well as in Mexico. We have a joint venture partner based in Montreal, and then one based in Mexico City, where we platform our brands into those two key markets. So we have not yet tapped in a commercial way into the Asian markets, and quite honestly, we're a little bit behind, because that's a very important market, as everybody knows, and we have that on our future radar, but not as of yet have we tapped into that commercial market. And then, as Alice said, just recently we've been acquired by Fruit of the Loom, which was a very good new parent for us. We went from, as I tell everybody, we went from a great parent in VF Corporation to a great parent in Fruit of the Loom. And it all comes back to our brand still being relevant and sustainable in the long term. And I think we've got a fantastic partner to help us do that. So enough of the commercial there. I'm going to show you this little tape because I think it's kind of cool. So Barry, if you can just run that first one.
The original company started manufacturing gloves and mittens. Both were made of glove silk, a specialty woven silk that stretched and contracted to fit a lady's hand. After 12 years in business, a new general manager for the company, Johnny Barbie, came up with a revolutionary idea, an exciting first: make ladies' undergarments from the stretchable glove silk. Customers loved the garments. Sales climbed. A contest to find the perfect name for the entire line of superior lingerie was held. The winning name, Vanity Fair. Gloves were dropped from the product line. Now the company was known as Vanity Fair Silk Mills Incorporated. Needing room to grow, the company moved to Alabama. New headquarters were established in Monroeville. When the U.S. entered World War II, Vanity Fair directed much of its silk into the manufacture of parachutes. To continue lingerie production during wartime, Vanity Fair developed a series of firsts. It pioneered the use of synthetic and silk blends, then introduced ladies' intimate apparel of 100% rayon. These firsts made fine lingerie easily affordable. More firsts. Vanity Fair introduced seasonal lines, mix and match ensembles, accurately sized garments, junior sizes. Then Vanity Fair surprised the entire industry, announcing that all Vanity Fair lines would be made from nylon tricot. The move was laughed at by the competition, but applauded by customers. Women loved tricot's varying weights and densities, looks ranging from opaque to ultra sheer. And tricot was sturdy enough for home washing machines, another Vanity Fair lingerie first. The apparel industry saluted Vanity Fair with major awards for innovation, style, and quality. And the innovations kept coming. Firsts such as the legendary leopard print lingerie, the introduction of lycra, color-coordinated bra girdle lingerie concept, Vanity Fair's famous chevelva fabric for loungewear, and lingerie fabrics of Antron 3 yarn with anti-cling built in. All Vanity Fair firsts, which the competition eagerly copied.
Okay, Barry. So pretty cool. Anybody like it? Come on, humor me. Humor me. So when we talk back to what makes a brand relevant, sustainable, and how does a brand last for 90 years, one of the things that any company, the only things that companies have are really their brands, their people, and the culture that surrounds both of those. And our company, fortunately, has a great brand, but we also follow a repeatable process because for the sustainability and the relevance, you need to, on a constant basis, consistently meet or exceed your consumer's expectation for the experience. And that experience is in total. If you think about it, I like to think about brands are like friends in some ways. It sounds corny, but it's true. If you think about a good friend, how many, I'm sure many of you, whether you want to admit it or not, have had friends at one point or another that all of a sudden kind of went into a funk. Well, you know, they're acting kind of strange lately, and I used to like hanging out with them. I don't really like hanging out with them anymore because they kind of got weird. I don't know what happened to them. Next thing you know, they kind of come back around and they're something happened. They're kind of, I don't know, they work through their issues, they come back around, you guys have a little, you know, knockdown, drag out, you know, what are you doing to me? Why are you doing this? Why are you acting that way? Next thing you know, you're best friends again. Brands can go in the same kind of direction because if you're not really, really careful to protect your brand and to make sure that you're consistent in what that brand stands for and how that brand's experience touches the consumers that draw upon that brand, you can go into periods where brands kind of suffer, and you have to go back and you have to kind of sit down and say, wait a minute, you know, the people aren't leaving the brand in many cases, the brand is leaving the consumer. You have to go back and say, who is my target? Who is my consumer? What are they looking for? And I need to consistently deliver up to that. To make that happen, it helps a lot to have a repeatable process that makes sure that you're sharpening your design skills, your merchandising skills, your marketing skills, your service skills. And if you want to think about it, it's kind of a, you may have heard this, it's something we like to kind of keep in our minds. But if you think about it easily, FDIC, right now you're hearing a lot about it for the wrong reason because everybody's worried about their money in the banks. So obviously it has one terminology, but we like to think about it as focus, discover, innovate, communicate, and then add service to that. So FDICS is kind of a repeatable process that we go through with all of our brands. We're talking primarily about Vanity Fair here today, but our whole portfolio, because we've got a global portfolio that we manage. Within that, focus is we need to understand, we do a fair amount of research with our consumers, and like any category out there, doesn't matter if it's apparel or automobiles, what have you, there are different types of consumers. You know it yourselves. You have friends that might have different purchasing behavior than you do. But you really need to understand, and we go through a fairly extensive segmentation analysis, it's called, and we go out and we have a whole list of questions to try to understand people's purchasing habits. And you don't get everything from that, but you get some pretty good indications. From that work, what we do is we carve out our consumers into segments. And there are 6 segments we like to use internally in the way that we position our brands, because we like to position our brands and all the things that flow behind a brand. The brands, the product development, the marketing messages, the in-store, the service, we like to line that all up. And in those segments, when we position, it goes really from the most highly involved in any category. Some of you might be real innerwear, intimate apparel zealots. You might really like to buy intimate apparel, and you might really like to dress from the inside out. There are others that really don't care about it. Just give me something that works and it's cheap. I really don't care. We have all types of consumers, and we go from what we call a brand diva, which is the most involved and the most into the category, and somebody that is really into brands and that really likes the messaging, and you really have to connect with on an emotional level, all the way to we make up these names, by the way, but we call them the discouraged concealer. The people that really don't care, they're not interested, they just want something that works. You know, give me what I need. I don't need a bunch of them, just need to have some underwear to wear. So we segment our brands against those targets to make sure that we're speaking and lining up all of our communication and our development and so forth against that target. Very, very important. And that has to constantly be thought of whenever we're doing anything related to the brand. Are we being true to that particular consumer in what she needs and wants in our case? Obviously, if it was a men's brand, it'd be a different story. So that is first. So first we target our brands, then we discover everything about that consumer that we can possibly think that they want, and we test a lot, and then we obviously go and innovate to her and have a consistent innovation engine. It's very, very clear. This is something I think is really important for you all. You probably know it. I don't know how many of you would hope to go out and do something on your own and come up with your own brand and your own concept. Maybe half of you. And some of you might work for another brand and design for another brand. You might do that on a temporary basis until you kind of, get yourself fully tuned, or you might do that forever. But I think what's really clear is when you innovate, we talk about innovation in two ways. It doesn't matter what business you're in, you can innovate in creating a new need, something that isn't out there anymore or isn't out there yet, or you can just give an improved way to deliver a current need. A couple of examples of this. I mean, the old-fashioned, everybody's heard it a million times, but if you think about it, it's fascinating what's happened in the technology world. There was a time that you've all heard this. It was way before most of you were actually very close to whenever I was just coming into the workforce. But computers, everybody estimated that there wasn't going to be a big demand. Why would anybody need a computer that would be able to house that much data on a personal level? Yeah, there was big boxes that companies use, but why would anybody need a personal computer, something in the homes? At one point there was a ridiculously low forecast for what the ultimate demand of that would be. Fast forward to today, when you've got Blackberries and texting and all of that, handheld devices that around the world in seconds can transmit information, and have given us the ability to find things to use with that tool that nobody even imagined. It was beyond anybody's wildest dreams not that long ago, because people said, why in the world would we need a personal computer at home? Now not only do we need a personal computer, we need something that's wireless that can, as soon as we get off a plane in China or Korea or wherever, we can be communicating instantly. I mean, imagine, now you probably can't even imagine what it'd be like not having a phone to text. I mean, you're probably sending hundreds of texts a day. So that's one example of creating a brand new need where people didn't even see it, and it's opened up a whole new world for us. On a very, very simple example of just an improved delivery method for a current need. I love this example, but the ketchup bottle. I mean, how many times have we had a ketchup bottle where you're sitting upside down and you're leaning it up against the side of the refrigerator, and you're getting it and trying to get the last piece out of the bottle, and you think, well, my God, they came up with a squeezed plastic bottle that happened to be marketed upside down. I mean, how obvious is that? But so many things are so obvious. So when you're thinking about your designs, it can be both way out there, like off the charts creative. Sometimes it can just be, hey, wait a minute, there's something staring right at us. And we have to just be aware of both. We have to really think about both opportunities because they're both important. But the innovation engine, what we do in our company to try to get people like you to get jazzed up and really get their mindset, is we start off every season. We tend to run 2 seasons a year. Most apparel companies do. Some do more breaks than that. Some do less. But we have 2 seasons a year where we do a formal kind of kickoff process where we talk about all the trends in the industry, what's going on with the consumers, what's going on in the runways. Obviously, we've got a platform in Europe, and everybody's going to the shows in Europe to see what the new designs are, what the new ideas are, just to kind of open up the minds of what's going on with the current consumers and what the relevant trends are. Then we kind of go inside, we get all of our creative people together, and we, with all of our marketing people and merchants and designers, and we talk about what's going on with our brands, what's going on with our competition, what's going on with the retail community, what's going on with the consumers in the local markets, and where do we think we want to focus our opportunities in our respective brands, where do we think the biggest opportunities lie? Getting somewhat specific. And then we roll forward and say, okay, we have a general opportunity, how are we going to translate that into product? And how are we going to make that consistent with the brand that it's for? Let's stay with Vanity Fair for a minute. We have to make sure we understand what the Vanity Fair brand stands for. We have to make sure that we understand what price points that our consumer, where she's shopping and what price points she wants. And we have to design into the aesthetic so that we can develop and create an emotional experience, meet and exceed that consumer's expectations with that particular design. One of the things I will tell you that when we have younger designers in our business, one of the things that we tend to, takes a little while to get there, is that there's not a good awareness of designing into a solution and a price point. Designing just for design's sake is not, you have to be commercial. You have to make sure that you're ending up designing into something that's going to be commercial within the confines of what you're trying to do in the brand and in the distribution channels that you serve. Now that can take many forms. There can be very many price points. We have a Lou brand in France. And France is the home of lingerie. And Lou is one of the original, they call it the Group of Seven, the original French lingerie brands, fantastic brand. But we're selling bras for $80 and $100, in some cases higher than that. And obviously the design aesthetic, it's a very high fashion, very, very fine details, very intricate laces. The design aesthetic that's going to go into Lou is going to be somewhat different than it's going to be for Vanity Fair. Is going to be different than, say, our Vassarette brand that's sold at Walmart. So as you think about where you might want to end up with your design talents, it's very important to understand what that ultimate consumer need is and what the delivery is that she's expecting so that you're designing into a solution. It's extremely critical. Kind of supporting that, after, after you focus on your target, understand everything about her, innovate for her, you communicate to her whatever the aesthetic and functional benefits of those great new products that you're coming down with. And we try to do that as scientifically as we can because there's so many different vehicles out there to communicate. And we really want to make sure that we're maximizing our communication investment. So that's really quite a bit of science, but I'm only throw it in there so that you know that it really is an end-to-end solution to make a brand sustainable and relevant. And you're not done there. You got this great idea, you got this, it fits the brand perfectly, you got this great product coming down that's just going to be tremendously innovative, and you have this great marketing message, but you got to get it to the consumer. And most companies today have global supply chains. So the connectivity, and this really comes down, there's a very big responsibility from the design end here as well, because something else that younger designers, I find, can fall into a pitfall until they kind of get knocked back and bruised a little bit, is never stopping to design. The biggest thing that will hurt the ability to get that product on a retailer's shelf, whether it's your own shops or whether it's a big box retailer or an internet marketing engine, is if you never stop designing. At some point, timelines are critical. I don't care if you're talking about bras or jeans or cars. You've got to have the discipline to be able to create your design vision, but you got to know when to stop. And you got to stop designing, because if you can be a perfectionist, which many of us can tend to be, you always want to make that last change. And if you do that, our business is very time sensitive. You know that, because fashion does not have a long shelf life. So you got to get in, you got to get out. You got to hit the trend, you got to get out. And that does not allow you just to sit back and say, well, I'd really like to change that bow again. I'm not sure if I have the right bow on that. That strap could probably be, you'll kill a company. Whether it's your company or somebody else's, you'll kill a company. You got to be very sensitive to timelines, because it's one thing to have a great idea, but you got to get it to that end consumer no matter where that is. And timeline discipline is critical in any company. So I would just keep that in mind no matter where you end up, to understand that you got to design to a solution, and you really have to be sensitive to timelines, because without that, you might be getting the product out of North China, might be getting it out of the Philippines, might be getting it out of Indonesia, and we get them out of all of those places. And we have to give those factories, no longer do we enjoy having a factory in our backyard where we can talk, well, that's really what I meant. You have to give those factories very clear communication about what that design intent is and what the specific components of that design are, and give them the time to execute it effectively to get it back here. And the very last point is that now we have, depending on the distribution options we have, technology today is amazing, and it will continue to evolve for the betterment of managing inventory. We sit back and say, okay, we've got all of this production coming over, and we have to place it in our distribution as carefully and as smartly as we possibly can, because just like there are different sets of consumers, there are different retailers out there. There are retailers that have tremendous velocity and have a larger format. There are retailers that have smaller velocity that have a smaller format. Even within the same retailer, and again, whether it's your own shops or somebody else's, one particular geography is going to have a slight different taste and also a different velocity level and potentially a different income level. So what we tend to do is we try to group all of the stores, depending on the type of distribution, together in stores that operate similarly in purchasing habits. So you got one thing is consumers that operate similarly, which is what we try to target our brands. But once you have that and you deliver your goods from wherever it is coming around the world, we try to place those goods into those retailers and into those distribution points as smartly as we can, because we want that investment for both us and for our partners on the retail side, and ultimately that consumer. We want that inventory to work for us as strongly as possible, and we always want those goods to be there in the size and the color that the consumer is looking for. And when you think about the dynamics of designing something, getting it here from halfway across the world, getting it into that retail shop that you're going to go into that's down the block, and making sure that they've got color red in the style that you want, it takes a tremendous amount of technology to do that well, and it can be a tremendous competitive differentiator for those that can do it well. So I say all of that just to say that when you think about what does it take to make a brand stick around for 90 years, there's brands that come and go, and there's brands that are high flyers, and then what happened to, it's because they don't have the consistency and the process in place to make sure that they're being true, and that that friend relationship is staying. I like hanging out with that person. You know why? Because they make me feel good. And whenever we go out to dinner, I always come back feeling better, and I'm smiling and I'm laughing. Apparel's no different. Why do you wear? You either like the way it feels on you. There's an emotional connection in apparel. There's emotional connection in almost all brands. But you want to have that emotional connection, and the only way you can do that is deliver that end-to-end consumer experience. When that consumer goes in and buys that brand, they feel good and they feel connected with that brand, and they feel that that brand understands me and delivers to me what I'm looking for. So when you're designing, when you're thinking about no matter where you end up, keep those points in mind, that it is a whole end-to-end experience. It really doesn't mean a lot if you just come up with something great and it never gets to the consumer. A great idea, poorly executed, isn't going to work. A bad idea, executed great, isn't going to work. You need really both working hand in hand, and you need to have an understanding. You don't need to be an expert, but you do need an understanding for the way you deliver that design to market is critical, and understanding the handoffs within a company, whether it's yours or somebody else, is extremely, extremely critical. So with that, I just have one other thing, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. You know what? Hold up on that. Let me pause right here and just ask. I'm going to skip right to, when you think about your own personal brand, now think about what I just talked about and think about what's important. If anyone wants to kind of throw out, what is your brand? If you could say it in a word or a couple words, what is your brand? What do you think you really bring to the party? What do you stand for if you were a brand and you were on a shelf in a store? Anybody? Functionality. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's very clear. It's very distinct. You don't have to guess. What's that all about? Understand it clearly. Anybody else? Timeless. Perfect. Actually, our Vanity Fair brand is timeless elegance. We believe that very, very, very clearly, but that actually tells into one of our brands. Anybody else? Fantasy. Very good. I think that's excellent. Anybody else? There's no right or wrong answer. The right answer is, whether it's here or when you leave here, I would just ask you to kind of consider that every so often. Are you being true to who? First of all, it's just like in a brand when you say, what segment do I want to target that brand after? What is it that you want your brand to be? And is your current actions supporting what you want your brand to be? That's the first step. If it's not, just like sometimes brands get wayward and they say, wait a minute, I have to go in and reposition my brand. I have to take my brand and I don't think my brand stands for what it really should anymore because I've kind of lost my way. Something you can think about personally. Believe me, I think about it all the time. And when I'm driving home at night, I'm thinking about, if I just came in and I was just asked to manage this portfolio of brands, are we doing the right things and are we connected? It's just a constant mental trigger. I think it's just helpful. Never, ever, ever think that you know everything, and never think that you got enough. Always think that you could be doing something better. I think that's critical. So first is your brand positioned the way you want it to be? If you're not sure, I'd ask you just to think about what is your brand that you want your brand to speak to. Then you think about, okay, how do I, when you've defined that for yourself, because I think that's going to, in many ways, it's going to be how you differentiate yourself in the market. It really is. And it sometimes seems overly simple, but sometimes the most powerful things are the most simple things. If it's too hard to understand, it's probably not going to stick around for a while. I've certainly learned that. The other thing I would ask you to do is, as I mentioned earlier, is to think about yourself as a product. Think about that product. Think about the fact that you need to be commercial. In whatever application you choose, there's no right or wrong answer, but you need to be commercial. What is my personal brand? I am a product. What is my product doing for whoever I'm serving? And making sure that I'm making commercial decisions, because it's really, really hard sometimes to have all this energy and creativity, and you want to come out and you want to build something that's going to, a rocket ship that's going to go to the moon, but it's not commercial. And then what have you really done, unless you're going to be in a think tank? There's places for people like that too. Just go lock them in a closet and come up with brainstorm ideas. I mean, there's lots of think tanks out there, and actually we use them every so often. They're people that just operate with no constraints. They go in there and they got great ideas flowing all over the place. Sometimes they can't be executed, but that's okay, because just getting your mind wide open and getting your, wow, I never thought of it that way. Sometimes that's really good. So there's a market for that kind of person as well. But you just need to understand what it is you're trying to deliver to. What's the commercial engine that you're operating in, and make sure that whatever you're doing is suiting that. It's just like if we designed for Lou and tried to sell it where Vanity Fair is distributed, it would not work. But if we're designing for Lou and selling into European boutiques and Galeries Lafayette in Paris and Printemps in Paris, it's working quite nicely. So it's, again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong, but there's a real strong personal awareness level that I think can really help. And it doesn't matter if it's Germany or Korea, or believe me, we have business in Paris. We've got a business in an office right outside of Barcelona. We do a small amount of business in Germany. We certainly look at the markets in China, and it's a fascinating market. We look at the markets in Korea. We look at the markets in India. Some things are very different, but there's a lot more commonality than there are differences, I will tell you. The other thing that I would say to you is, again, just reminding you that make sure that as you're making decisions, just continue to use your own personal benchmarks as to whether or not those decisions are consistent with where you really want to go. And if they're not, then just figure out a plan to try to swing them. I will tell you that in this environment right now, I'll tell you it's a crazy environment. We all know that. It is what it is. My boss always says that to me, and I love it, because it's kind of, I kind of share some of that. You know, we can sit here and we can look back, and people that look back generally don't get too much further ahead. Or we can just say, you know what, let's understand what we're dealing with, and let's develop a plan that deals with reality and deals with where we are. Because looking back sometimes just doesn't get, it's good for instructive learning. You should always learn lessons from mistakes or successes, but don't spend a lot of time looking back. Look forward. Because in today's climate, I really believe, and this can be challenged, but this is my own personal belief, I really believe that something as simple as having a very positive attitude, can-do, bright-eyed, throw me the ball, sports not again, I'm sorry, so some other analogy, but something as simple as attitude and having energy and being upbeat and being optimistic and saying, I'm here to do whatever you need to do and I'm going to figure it out, is going to be a differentiator in the workforce in every area. It doesn't matter in design or any acumen out there. I really believe, because some people, we were talking about it right before, this kind of fear campaign that's out there for a number of different reasons, and some of it's real. I mean, it's bizarre out there right now. But what you end up doing in a situation like that is come back to the fundamentals. Just like a brand comes back to the fundamentals, come back to your own personal fundamentals and your own personal brand and your own product, and recognize, I really believe that how you act and how you behave, people recognize. Certainly employers recognize. If you're going to go out on your own, whoever you're dealing with, because you're going to have to raise some money, presumably, whoever it is, if it's for your parents or friends or a bank, whoever you're dealing with in every transaction, just remember that that's a reflection on your brand. And right now, your brand needs to be upbeat, it needs to be energetic, and it needs to be, let me at it, and I'll do what I need to do. because I really believe that a lot of people are going to get kind of hung up with the cloud on them, and it's going to show. And those people in a competitive environment are not going to be the ones that shine through, and the opportunities are not going to end up showing up. I also have a little bit of a different view in that light. Some people think you should really aggressively manage your career. I haven't talked to Alice about this. Maybe, I don't know if she does or doesn't. I happen to find myself in the minority here. I'm not much about managing the career. I'm more about managing your brand, and the career will take care of itself. Because if you do what's right, and if you really think of yourself as a product, and you really put yourself out there to be a real value product, and value can come at $1,000 or it can come at 20. It all depends on the situation. But I happen to think that the career takes care of itself. And I don't care if you're going into business for yourself or if you're working for a brand somewhere else. I think you manage your personal brand and your career will take care of itself. And you have to be willing to sacrifice. You really do. You have to be willing to say, hey, because you're out there competing and trying to differentiate yourself. So it's something that I really believe in, and I get challenged on that a lot because I know, and maybe it's because I've been very lucky, and I recognize I've been very lucky, that I've never asked for a job in my life. Never asked for a job in my life. I've just kept my head down, tried to do everything I possibly could, tried to continue to add value to my brand, and opportunities came up. And I will really challenge you that that's the way to get opportunities. Not to always be asking, hey, what's next for me? Hey, what can I do next? Hey, believe me, there's not enough good people out there that if you're really making yourself valuable, and if you're really kind of sucking up opportunities that come around, the opportunities will come after you. So, as I usually do, I get long-winded, I start rambling, I forget even what I'm starting about. But yeah, let me just pull up for a second here and just ask if there are any questions, or if you guys are just ready to get on with your Monday night. Anybody have any questions? No, let me be clear on that one, because again, this is controversial. I don't have many people that agree with me. I absolutely look to add value, but I do that in ways that when you're working on your own or when you're working with a company, there's always things that you can kind of jump into. And a lot of times there's two kinds of people. Can you believe somebody's asking me to do that over there? It may not be in, I don't know what a job spec is. And that's a terrible thing to say if I was but I don't know what it is. All I know is, hey, that's something I think I could do, and I want to get after it, and I want to learn that because it's going to help my brand. And if there's an opportunity over there, there's going to be a lot of people sitting over here, well, I'm not going to do that because that's not in my job, and why isn't he or she doing that, and why isn't he or she? All I'm saying is that I've always operated with saying, hey, let me at it, because that's the way but I've never, and because of that, whenever you're sitting back and you're saying, let me look at who is ready for that next step. Let me look at who can do more. Typically, in my opinion, that's a quicker way to find yourself having opportunities come after you. You don't have to go look for them. So you do the things that keep adding value to your brand by doing as much as you can, and then you find yourself saying, hey, wait a minute, that person's pretty valuable. I wonder if they could also do X, Y, and Z. Again, you walk out of here, you'll get 10 people that are going to say that's the wrong approach. Food for thought. Anybody else? Go ahead. Yeah, I find that one, personally, I find that impossible to answer unless I knew more about your personal situation, because I would have to say, if you have the opportunity to get otherworldly experience, and many don't. In other words, I didn't have that opportunity earlier on. So I kind of got into a business condition. If you have the opportunity, I don't think you can ever go wrong with sucking up the experience of other countries and other experiences. It can only make you better. But if you don't have that opportunity, it's not something that you should be disappointed by or frown on, because maybe that opportunity will come later. So I think it really comes down to what's your own situation, what opportunities do you have in front of you, what are your resources. You know, some people say, hey, I'd love to, I got to get a job. I got to like start making money. So it all depends. But you can never go wrong with experiences. Experience is one of the greatest mind changers there is. I don't care what it is. Even, you know, as great as it is, and I've had the good fortune of working for a company for a long time. I worked for 3 different companies, but I've worked for the same company in various forms for a long time. Probably some of the greatest learnings I've had is whenever I've moved companies, because you just find out that there's different ways to skin a cat. You know, you can always do things differently, and it makes you think differently. So change is a great learning accelerator, period. You cannot go wrong. You just have to manage it and make sure that you're landing somewhere. Some people say, well, I want to do this, I want to do this. Well, next thing you know, time goes by and you say, okay, you've done it, but what have you really accomplished? So you just have to be sensitive to that. Anybody else? You're there with a pencil, and I'm not going to tell you. It can be off the record. Well, clearly, you're not going to write this, right? Okay. I will tell you that I think the, you know, it's all about the business you're in. You have to understand the conditions of the business you're in. Right now, I think, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier, there's always going to be pockets of opportunity. There's opportunity in every climate. But right now, I think that it's inevitable. We would all agree that, you know, the environment's going to be deleveraging. Within that, in all likelihood, it seems inevitable that the consumer purchasing is going to drop a bit. That's why we're going to have somewhat of a lower level of demand for a period of time. And within that, there's going to be more consolidation. Not like there hasn't been consolidation, but in the businesses that we're in the markets that we're in, there's going to be more consolidation on the retail front as well as on the brand front, because effectively they're going to have to be more value extracted out of because consumers aren't going to all of a sudden start paying a lot more for goods and services. They're just not. There may be inflation coming down the road a little bit later, but in our world, we're not going to win by saying, okay, all of a sudden we're just going to raise everything by 10%, which means the retail front and the brand front is going to be overcapacitated. And with an overcapacitated situation, you have to take some of that capacity out of the system to continue to be able to deliver up the value that consumers are going to expect, to be able to deliver up that consumer experience that makes brands lasting and sustainable and relevant. So, long-winded way of saying, I think that we are extremely fortunate to have the background, well-capitalized background of our new ultimate parent, which is Warren Buffett, who owns Fruit of the Loom. Fruit of the Loom owns Vanity Fair Brands. And in today's climate, when the financial pressures are going to be even that much greater, those that are able to make the investments in their brands and their products and the technology that delivers the services are going to be able to separate themselves. And those that have the economic power to be able to look for opportunities for consolidation, to be able to add more value and deliver more value, are going to be those that succeed long term. And I think that in our world, we're very well positioned to be able to do that. So we're looking at this as, like most companies do, some companies just don't have the ability to go after it. But this is, in difficult economic times, you know, it's been well studied that those are the times when companies can make the biggest moves. And we're looking at this as an opportunity for our company because we happen to have, you know, a very well capitalized parent. So, long-winded answer, but that's what we see. But please, obviously I wouldn't want that anywhere public. Boy, that's a great question because it's getting a heck of a lot of press right now. It's interesting, you know, the oil went to 140 bucks, now it's back down, and, you know, I think the long-term trend, everybody would agree. I mean, OPEC's already talking about, you know, pulling back, and even though it's low today because the demand is lower, some of the speculation's out of the market, all that stuff. The Chinese economy, which was driving some of that. There's a lot of factors bringing it back down. I won't tell you, I'm smart enough to figure out how it could go to 140 and then back down to its current levels, but over time, the trend is probably going to be to increase. But we went from feeling severe price pressures in materials, in the synthetics that you're talking about, that are oil-based, to now going back and saying, hey, you know, we gave you one, how about giving us one back kind of thing. But the cotton, and cotton went through the roof too, but is now, you know, the cotton futures have come down quite a bit. The trend towards naturals is a very, very strong trend, which I don't think is going to do anything but get stronger. Where we wrestle with that a little bit is when you talk about green, it's really a matter of timing, because right now and some people are doing very well at it. I mean, doing a great job, and other people are kind of getting their toes stubbed. In most cases, to be able to deliver that up, you have to ask for a premium because it's a little bit more expensive to deliver up that green product. And the consumer's appetite right now, there are some zealots out there, some, you know, people that are just not going to, I mean, my wife is getting close to one. You know, they're going to put only natural in their body, they're only going to wear natural, et cetera, et cetera. But the market for that right now, to be able to pay that premium, is, in my opinion, still not there for us to make a big move towards that. So we, for one, are going to follow that as opposed to try to, well, we'd already be late to lead it because there's a lot of people out there already doing it. But we don't see the economic value there and the market size large enough for us to go after it aggressively today. But that'll change, like everything. Cost of things come down. Ultimately, that'll get more affordable. Some people will have won that early game. Some people got, you know, they always say, what is it, the pioneers got the land, the Indians got the arrows, or something like that. This is one that we're going to kind of wait a little bit. So, but it's absolutely, I think, here to stay. I don't think there's anybody that would argue that point. And it's a very, very important and growing consumer trend. Yes. Yes. Depending on the business you're in, the ultimate consumer you're trying to serve, the distribution, whatever that may be, whatever country that may be, the price points that you think that your brand and your consumer will bear, that you keep that in mind as you're designing. Because so many times we have people that start out trying to design a Cadillac, and then you get down and say, but the consumer's only going to pay for a Volkswagen. What are we going to do with this Cadillac? And now we got to re-engineer the whole Cadillac to get it down to a Volkswagen. If you really think you're going to sell a Volkswagen, let's start out designing a Volkswagen. Is that making any sense to you, or is that kind of Greek? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about, is just understand your market and understand who you're serving and design into that, as opposed to designing something that may be way out of bounds, and then you have to say, how do I get it down to a commercial point of view? Because at the end of the day, and it might be that your commercial point of view is $250 jeans and, you know, $1,000 sweaters. I mean, I'm not suggesting one's right or one's wrong. I'm just saying know your business, know your consumer, and know whatever the brand delivery is, and design into that. Don't just design and then say, okay, can anybody afford this? Yes. Never any serious conflict. We actually think it's a great advantage because it happens to be that the positioning of Vanity Fair magazine, it's obviously a very elegant, very sophisticated, very upscale positioning. We think it fits nicely in with our positioning with Vanity Fair lingerie, and it's kind of like our silent weapon to some degree because we get distorted brand awareness that isn't necessarily created by us, it's created by the magazine. As an example, we are taking Vanity Fair, the brand, we are creating our own retail shops in Spain. And we started the first, we now have 22, and we are looking to add in Spain. And that, for us, was a brand launch into Spain for Vanity Fair, the lingerie brand. Just coincidentally, we knew about this a while back, but the Vanity Fair magazine just launched in Spain. It had not been presently distributed in Spain, or previously distributed, so it just launched in Spain. So they've got, bus stops and everything with the launch of the Vanity Fair magazine, and obviously consumers are, looking at that, and they don't know the difference, which is to our advantage. And we've had conversations with the magazine, about opportunities to maybe work together to help each other out. But we look at it as a great advantage and no conflict whatsoever. And our conversations with the magazine have not been, they've been no problem at all. And we're still looking for maybe, a way to use each other for each brand's opportunities. The lingerie. I should know that history, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't, but I am sure that way back when that happened, there's usage rights that you have, as you probably know, within categories, and all I can suggest is that either that was a discussion, and again, I'm going to find this out now because I should know it, but either there was a discussion or, we never protected the media categories, so it was available for use. And without protecting, you have to protect certain zones, and we wouldn't have protected that. They went into it, and away we go. So the same thing can happen today. I mean, we get challenged all over the world about so-and-so wants to use a brand for a particular reason. Sometimes we have it protected, and they're still trying to use it. Sometimes we don't have it protected, and we have to think about whether or not we can demonstrate any usage in that particular category, or we just let it go. So my guess is that's probably what happened. Well, Victoria's Secret is, bar none, the most dominant in our particular business, and they do a great job. But Victoria's Secret, as an example of really understanding your brand and positioning it, we, up until recently, as I said, we're opening our own stores in Europe, and we're doing that because we think that's the right place to kind of, the vertical retailing is even more prevalent there. We think that we can kind of learn from that market. And do that first. But we have not tried to compete with the specialty level of a Victoria's Secret. We've certainly married our brands up with our retail partners in the department and chain store level. From a positioning point of view, one of the things that in delivering a consumer experience, one of the reasons why Victoria's Secret has been so successful is because they do a great job of being able to deliver that whole experience. Are you a Victoria's Secret shopper? Okay. Well, you go in, they've got, in many cases right now, one of the things that we tend to help our retailers with is some service in the stores, because it's become, even in the department store level, a little bit more self-serve than historically it's been, and that's for cost reasons. So the ability to kind of create that consumer experience gets dulled a little bit. Victoria's Secret still does a great job within their stores of having associates that are very well trained on their products, that can help you navigate through, the bra area, for instance, as opposed to daywear, sleepwear, pants, or whatever, happens to be, as you guys know better than I, somewhat of a tough area to shop, because it's, it's not an easy thing to go out and find a bra. So you tend to find a brand, or you find a product, and you go back and say, give me 6 of those, because I really like that one. So Victoria's Secret, they control the whole experience, and they do a great job of it, and that creates a competitive barrier for them, I will admit. But within the world that we're in right now, and the formats that we're in, we're not out there with that more overt sexiness within Vanity Fair. If I talked about, we do have a couple of brands that do serve that consumer. Lily of France, for instance. Lily of France has a very sexy positioning, and the retail formats that we're in that carry Lily of France, we talk a lot about you're losing that consumer to Victoria's Secret because she's not able to find that same kind of a sexy offering that appeals to that consumer. Let us be your solution to draw that consumer into your store so she's not walking from you and going to Victoria's Secret. And then let's think about the other in-store things that we can do to make that experience easier to navigate for that consumer, easier to find that brand, easier to find the style that works for them. So we use ourselves and position our brands, those that position against Lily or against Victoria's Secret, as kind of a solution for those retailers and those consumers that are in their doors but aren't finding the intimate apparel that they want. So that's one case. The Vanity Fair case, we actually go against. There's a lot of consumers through our research that really don't want to go into Victoria's Secret. It intimidates them because they just don't feel comfortable. It's a little bit too sexy. It's a little bit too overt. It's like, I'm just not comfortable with that. I want to be sensual. I want to be elegant. I want to be well put together. I want to feel great with my innerwear. And I do sometimes dress from the inside out, but I want it to be in a much softer, sensual way than the Victoria's Secret edge. So we actually try to, and there's a large group out there, we actually try to appeal with our Vanity Fair brand to that consumer. And we try to do everything to that consumer, not the kind of, for lack of a better word, in your face. And I say that saying, please don't write any of this. But I say that. See, Alice, this is why I said I don't want anybody here writing anything down because I never know what I'm going to say. So, but I say that with that. Yeah, no, I kid a little bit. They're a great magazine, but anything else? Alice, you'll tell me when you want to kick me out of here, right? Okay. Oh, you're quite... Yeah, we needed to streamline operations actually, and we were, for business reasons, we were being, for all the right reasons by the way, VF Corporation was kind of deferring and deflecting some of the investment away from our business towards some of its newer acquisitions. And those are choices that businesses make, and they're not right or wrong, they're just choices, and that's the way we looked at it. So we went into a little bit of a period, which is quite usual for a transaction, any kind of an acquisition. You go into a little bit of a freeze period where there's not, because obviously you don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're going to be selling. I mean, it's no different than, your house or your car or whatever the case may be. You try to do as little as you can. And the reasons that they were selling our business is because they were going after a lot more of outerwear type activities. So the good news is that they found a parent, and it was important to VF. I give them all the credit in the world. It's important for them to kind of, because our business was the origin of VF Corporation. That's where the VF came from. We were the original company way back in those early 1900s. So what it did allow us to do is get out of that somewhat holding pattern, and we had some things we wanted to do as a business to compete more effectively, both on the streamlining as well as putting more investment against our brands so we could talk to our consumers more aggressively through the media. And it's allowed us to kind of go much more aggressively in that area, which was, we knew we had to do, Fruit of the Loom knew we had to do. It was all part of the deal. So it's been a good thing, I think, on both fronts. It's it's business. Business is business. That's the first thing. Business is business. Personal is personal. You try to marry those up as best you can, but at the end of the day, don't ever forget we're in business. Yeah. I have not yet. I hope to at some point, but I have not yet. He might be for all you hear, he might be in the White House, sitting beside Obama. Did you have a question or no? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, that's a great question. I gotta pause on that one for a second. The one thing that is just a hard skill, in my opinion, to be oversupplied on is creative talent. So, but the real differentiator is creative talent with a business understanding and a business acumen. To me, that's a very powerful combination. And when you think about when companies are going through, the common term is right sizing, trying to size the structure of the company to the current demand climate. And we all went from what was an artificial layer of demand based on everybody out there, spending on credit. That artificial layer of demand is getting taken out of the system. So the demand curve is coming down a bit, which is why the market's down and revalued and all of that. So now companies are going back in, and we're all hearing about this in the press, and we're no different, by the way. Some of it defensive and some of it offensive, saying I need to reposition, the business to the current level of demand. A lot of that, the good news for you all, not suggesting there's going to be people out there with, help wanted signs all over the country, but the good news for you all is in creative areas, when you think about the reductions that are being made, it's going to be more skewed towards the infrastructure and less skewed towards the creative, because it's important in this environment to have strong creative skill, to be able to differentiate, to be able to keep those brands thriving, to be able to keep creating great new product that's going to deliver solutions for our consumers. So I don't think there's anything, quite honestly, right now. It's a great question, but there's nothing that's going to buffer the overall lower amount of opportunities as the economy gets kind of right-sized and the companies get right-sized. And how long that'll last, everybody has their own opinion on it. But the one thing I do say is that probably the creative talent, whether it's creative merchandising or creative design or creative marketing, those are areas where they're probably a little bit more buffered than the rest. Just because people are going to try to rationalize on things that are going to be not affecting the product and not affecting some of the brand statements as much as they can. So that's the best I can do with that one. Anything else? Well, guys, I had fun. By the way, the Steelers are on tonight, so if you don't watch football, watch it. If you do, root for the Steelers.